Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark, and I want to get right into things today because, as you will see, I've got a lot to do to get this watch running right again. This is a watch from one of my subscribers, and right away you can see that we are missing the bow to this watch. The watch's bow is used to protect the crown of the watch and can also be used for hanging the timepiece or attaching a pocket watch chain. So what we've got here is a Burlington size 16 pocket watch with a very interesting dial. The way the minutes are divided up like this almost makes me believe that this could be a railroad watch. I know that one of the features required for a railroad watch is that it has to be a lever set movement, and here we see that this is indeed a lever set. Now, I couldn't wind this watch, but it does appear that the keyless and motion works are working as they should. So I'll just lift the movement out of the case to get a better look at things, and I can see that this is a 19 joule movement. The first test I want to do is to check to see if the balance wheel is free, and I like to do that with just a puff of air. And yeah, we can see here that we've got some kind of an issue with the balance assembly. So I'll remove the hands and then take the movement out of the case. The owner of this watch told me that the watch belonged to his father and that he carried it every day for work in the 1960s. We'll get into more of that later, but anyway, his father forgot to take it out of his pocket once on laundry day, and the watch went through a cycle in the washing machine. Not surprising, the watch hasn't run since that day in the 1970s. But that's not for a lack of trying. I'll tell more about that story a little later on. The trip through the washing machine has me pretty concerned about rust. I've dealt with a bit of rust before, but nothing too extensive. I really want to get this watch running again and get it back to the owner. Timepieces like this are not only a connection to the past, but also a connection to family, and in this case, a father who sadly is no longer with us. So as we take a look at the movement, let's get a closer look at the balance wheel and the hairspring. Oh geez, that don't look too good. To be honest, this is exactly what I was expecting to find. No wonder it's not swinging properly. And here we see some signs of rust peeking out from behind the ratchet wheel and the crown wheel. So let's see if we can release the tension on the mainspring. This watch is wound up tight, but I am able to move the click out of the way, and I can slowly let down this spring. I've sped the video up to 2 times speed here just to move things along a bit. And if you're wondering what the tool is that I'm using, it's called a 6-prong bench key. So once that's done, I'll remove the dial. And here I find some kind of a brown sludge. This may be dried up oil of some kind. I'm not really sure. So as I continue, I'm starting to form a game plan in my head. I know that there are chemicals out there for removing rust, or if the rust hasn't gotten very deep into the metal, I can just scrape it off with some pegwood or a fiberglass brush. But there's also the possibility that I'm going to have to completely replace some of these badly damaged parts with parts from a donor movement. So with the dial removed, I get a better idea of the damage. The setting lever looks pretty crunchy, but to be honest, the rest just looks like it's just the surface rust that I was talking about. So I mentioned probably having to get a donor movement from the same manufacturer, and that brings me to the maker of this watch, the Burlington Watch Company of Chicago, Illinois. This is a really unique company when it comes to pocket watches of the time period, and we're talking about the early 1910s. The Burlington Watch Company was a mail order sales company, and by selling directly to the consumer, they were able to eliminate the costly sales and distribution channel, basically cutting out the middleman. Watches were sold on the installment plan, which allowed them to be paid off at $2 to $3 per month, thus making high-quality watches available to those who otherwise might not be able to afford them. The majority of the watches sold by Burlington were privately labeled movements made under contract by the Illinois Watch Company. So basically, they're Illinois watches. Some contend that the Burlington Watch Company was a subsidiary of the Illinois Watch Company, but this claim hasn't really been documented. In the early years, most of the watches sold by Burlington were size 16, 19 jewel movements based on the Illinois Model 5 and Model 9. And that is exactly what we have here. So when I'm looking for another donor, I can either find another Burlington, like this one, or a similar Illinois brand. So let's put this movement into a movement holder and continue with the disassembly. I always remove the balance assembly first because this is one of the most delicate parts of the watch. But here we see that there is really no reason to be careful because this hairspring is toast. Oh. And will have to be replaced anyway. I'm going to try to keep the balance cock, however, because it has a serial number that is matched to the movement, and I want to keep those together. As I remove the crown wheel screw, you may notice that this screw is reverse thread. This is almost always the case, but there are some instances where it's not. So be careful here, or you can break the head off the screw. And as I suspected, there's more rust. I'll remove the click and the click spring. Then the ratchet wheel. And again, here's more rust. So as I remove the barrel bridge, I want to continue with the story of this watch. The owner related to me that even though this watch was manufactured in the 1920s, his father didn't buy it until the 1950s. He explained that his father was a lineman in the 1950s and 60s, and it was a mandate from the electric company that he worked for that linemen could not wear wristwatches. I assume that was for safety reasons. They were probably prohibited from wearing any kind of metal around their wrists or rings on their fingers, but I don't know that for a fact. If anyone out there knows for sure, please leave that in the comments below. I would love to hear the real story about this. So this really doesn't look too bad. Even though the barrel appears to be stuck into the bridge, the rust doesn't look like it's anything worse than just some staining on the metal. I'm actually pretty happy about that. These parts are called the winding stem, the sliding clutch, and the winding pinion. And together they allow for winding the watch and for setting the time. Next, I'll remove the train wheel bridge. Here you'll notice that I examine every screw before I put it in the parts tray. I make note of any differences in the screws and where they came from. All screws are not the same. And with the bridge removed, we can see the train of wheels laid out before us. But because of the condition of the movement, some of the wheels are stuck and won't come out as easily as they normally would. So we have to be careful and take our time. You don't want to force anything. I was able to get the escape wheel out though. Anyway, I'll just continue on and remove the pallet fork bridge and the pallet fork, inspecting the screws and the pallet fork along the way. Now I'll turn the movement over and you'll notice that I hadn't removed the canyon pinion yet. And to be honest, it was just a mistake. I forgot to take this off earlier. So with that removed, the center wheel drops free from the other side. I'll take a piece of pegwood and gently press the pivots on the stuck wheels in an attempt to loosen them up. And the seconds wheel actually falls out. And with a drop of oil and some time, the last wheel is removed. So as I remove the parts of the keyless works, let's talk more about this watch and why it was left for so long without being repaired. So the story goes that the mother of the subscriber who sent in this watch took it to a local watchmaker about the time that it was left in the laundry. And somehow the watchmaker said that he stepped on the mainspring and was having trouble finding a new one. Now that part of the story really doesn't track for me because mainsprings for this watch would have been available back in the 1970s just as they are today. But the owner said that he was only 8 years old at the time and he's really not too sure about the story, so who really knows? Maybe he was talking about the hairspring, and as we've already noted, that was in terrible shape. Anyway, apparently the watchmaker always had an excuse as to why he didn't fix the watch whenever they went in to pick it up. Eventually, I think they just forgot about the watch, until about 7 years later, the mother went back and demanded to get the watch back. I'm not sure if the watchmaker charged her anything, but from what I can see here, it doesn't look like he did anything to try to fix it. Since then, it has just sat in a drawer until about 10 years ago when his dad gave the watch to him and told him to try to get it fixed someday if he could. So that is quite a story. It really makes me even more excited to see if I can get this watch running again and back into the hands of the owner. Before I run the parts through the watch cleaning machine, I want to take some time and scrape off most of the surface rust with a piece of pegwood. This will help me to evaluate each part to see if I think it can be saved or if I'll have to replace it. It's not a real complicated process, but I do find it very interesting and pretty rewarding. As you can see, I'm having quite a bit of success removing the rust, but I'm making quite a mess in the process. I stop every so often to resharpen the tip of the pegwood with an X-Acto knife. And this helps to get into and clean the jewel holes, as well as cleaning off the rust and the old lubricants, grease, and oils. So let's start to clean and disassemble the mainspring barrel. Based on the story I heard about the previous watchmaker saying he stepped on the mainspring, I'm interested to see what's inside the barrel. I'm pretty sure I already know the answer to that because it doesn't look like the barrel had even been removed from the movement since it had went through the washing machine. But let's take a look anyway. And just as I thought, there is indeed a mainspring inside. The arbor looks pretty rusty, and it's not the surface rust like I've been finding on some of the other parts. So here I want to do something a little different. Since I'll be replacing the cleaning chemical that I use in the first stage of the watch cleaning machine, after this watch anyway, I'm going to pour a little bit of it into the small jar. That way I can put some of the more rusted parts through a cycle and the ultrasonic to see if I can get a deeper clean and try to loosen up more of that rust. And by the looks of it, there is definitely some cleaning going on in here. I'll show some close-ups of the results a little bit later. Now I spent a considerable amount of time pre-cleaning all the parts with pegwood, as I've shown before, and I was able to get really good results. But now I want to get some chemical cleaners involved to see just how clean I can get these parts. I'll load everything up into these mesh trays and baskets, and I'll run it all through the cleaning machine. So here are the parts that were just too far gone, along with the freshly cleaned used parts that I got from a donor movement that I was able to purchase off of eBay. And here I want to show how I clean and lubricate the jewel hole and the capstone of the balance cock. It's just a matter of removing these two tiny screws on top of the cock and removing the capstone. Again, I peg the jewels and then I soak them in 99% isopropyl alcohol. With everything clean and dry, I apply a drop of Mobius 9010 to the cap jewel, and then I carefully place the balance cock back in place, trying not to disturb that little drop of lubricant. Then I just screw everything back into place. And then I just replace the regulator. Next is the tedious job of fitting the hairspring stud back into the hairspring cock. There are a couple different ways that this can be done, but with this particular setup, I like to place the balance wheel assembly into place first and then place the balance cock on top. Then I line up the stud with the hole and tighten down the stud screw. That's not too bad. I like this part next because I get to use my vintage K&D mainspring winder set. This set was specifically made for pocket watch mainsprings, so it makes it so easy. And yes, I am reusing the mainspring that came with the watch. It looked fine to me, no footprints on it. I did want to mention here that I did lubricate the mainspring with Mobius 8200 prior to closing the barrel. So as I start to reassemble this movement, I think I'm going to try to share one of my favorite things about this whole process, the calming effect it has on me. I'm just going to shut my mouth here for a little bit and let you enjoy the sights and sounds of this watch. I hope you find it as relaxing as I do. I will, however, make note of the part names and the lubricants that I use in the bottom corner of the screen as I go along. So I want to cut in here for just a minute and mention that you may have noticed that the color fill of the lettering of the movement looks a lot better. Well, that's because I refilled these areas with paint. I didn't add that to this video because I didn't want it to become too long, but if you'd like to see how I did this, just leave a comment below, and if I get enough interest, I'll make a detailed video of the process that I used. So as I install the pallet fork and secure it with the pallet fork bridge, I can feel my heart starting to beat a little faster. It's a mix of excitement and dread because I know that I'll be installing the balance assembly soon, and I really want to see this movement running again. And I'm nervous that I may have done something wrong, or didn't clean something right, or one of 1,000 other things that can go wrong. So here we go. Wish me luck. Nothing at first, but I'll just give it a little wiggle, and yes, it's running again. That looks pretty good. I just need to screw it down and add a little bit more wind. So after lubricating all the jewels and doing a lot of adjusting and regulation, I've got everything running pretty well. And I am so happy about that. Now I can turn my attention to the dial. As you can see, there are some cracks and a little rust staining coming through. I think I'm going to try using denture cleaning tablets to try to reduce the appearance of those cracks. I've used this method before in an earlier video, and I had great results. So if you're going to try this yourself, just make sure that it's an enamel dial. If you try to use it on anything other than an enamel dial, you risk serious damage to the dial. Enamel is a baked-on finish, and it is really very tough. But with that said, I've seen this method fade the black numerals and logos if it's left in the solution for too long. I think I only left this dial in there for about 15 to 20 minutes, so that's a good place to start. I'm going to replace this acrylic crystal with a new one. And for the case, I'm just going to use some Never Dull polish and a very light touch. Nothing too dramatic. So with the case cleaned and slightly polished, the new crystal installed, and a new replacement bow attached, I'm all ready to recase this movement and see how good it looks all together again. This has been such a satisfying restoration. It turned out so much better than I thought it would. To be honest, I was so nervous about this project. I was so afraid of the amount of rust on this movement, but I just moved through it part by part, cleaned what I could, and I was lucky to find great donor parts to replace what I couldn't get salvaged. So as I attach the hands, look how well this dial turned out. I think it turned out just great. The cracks are still there, but they are much less noticeable. I hope you've enjoyed watching this restoration. I really appreciate all the kind comments that I've been getting on my other videos. I'm also so incredibly thankful for those of you who have gone to my Buy Me a Coffee page and donated to this channel. I'd like to recognize these great subscribers for their support. I've got some of the greatest fans around. Again, thank you so much. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can do so in many different ways. The easiest would be to just subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help my videos to be seen by more people, which in turn motivates me to make more videos just like this. And if you'd like to show your support in the form of a donation, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/watchasilearn and choose whatever amount you want. It can be as little as $5. And believe me, every little bit helps and is so appreciated. I'll also leave a link in the description below, or you can click here and it'll take you straight to the page. And as you've seen, everyone who donates will get their name shown in my next video. So that about wraps it up. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Looking forward to hearing all the comments and any suggestions that you have for any of my future videos. Again, thank you so much, and until next time, take care and God bless.